The violation notice was taped directly over the brass plaque that read, "Live oak, planted 1879, an act so clueless it bordered on performance art. Paper bright as a hazard cone, type screaming in 72-point Arial black, ugly tree, remove within 14 days, or face fines of $250 per day." It fluttered in the dawn breeze, while squirrels performed acrobatics among the branches of the so-called eyesore, and a mockingbird practiced its mashup of car alarms and blue jay curses. I stood there barefoot in dew-cold grass, coffee mug steaming in one hand, pajamas flapping, trying to decide whether to laugh, swear, or take a photo. In the end, I did all three. The Riverside Heritage Homeowners Association had never been subtle, but this time they'd outdone themselves. The live oak was the oldest living thing in the county, older than most of the town's buildings, older than the river bridge everyone thought of as historical. My grandfather, Everett Sloan, house painter by trade, amateur historian by passion, had hammered that plaque in himself after verifying the age with the county forester in 1962. A decade later, the tree was entered into the county's historic Flora Registry, complete with an embossed certificate and a fuzzy black and white photo of my mother at age 8 hugging the trunk. I knew these details because the documents sat in a banker's box in my basement, sandwiched between my parents' wedding album and a stack of obsolete 514-inch floppy disks. I also knew them because, frankly, the tree was why I'd outbid 3 other couples for this house when I moved back home after a messy divorce. You could feel the weight of its years in every room it shaded. You could hear it creak at night like an old ship. You could watch the way neighborhood kids instinctively quieted when they entered its orbit, as if stepping into a library. I slipped the notice into a Ziploc bag, snapped a close-up of the plaque for timestamp proof, then texted both images to my sister Mara, who happened to be a land use attorney. She replied 2 minutes later with exactly 3 words: "They are toast." While I showered and dressed, the group chat for our end of Riverside exploded. Miss Celine across the lane reported a demand to repaint her lavender gingerbread trim a muted taupe. Tom and May, 2 doors down, were ordered to relocate solar panels so they couldn't be seen from the street, and someone else, anonymous number, claimed a citation for inappropriate porch statuary. A laughing Buddha no higher than a mailbox. The HOA had clearly staged an overnight blitz. Only my property, though, was hit with a removal order. No corrective pruning, no relocation, just a deadline for execution. Something smelled like fertilizer, and not the good kind. At 9 a.m., I carried 3 musty boxes up from the basement and spread their contents across the dining table. The 1973 Historic Flora Certificate, Granddad's correspondence with the County Botanist, a 1959 16mm reel labeled Founders Day, and a clutch of Polaroids showing summer picnics beneath the oak's spreading limbs. I scanned every page, then drafted a concise email titled Historic Landmark Notice, Cease and Desist, and sent it to the HOA board's shared address. CC to Mara and blind copy to 3 reporters from the local paper who'd covered a recent zoning scandal. Because if the association wanted drama, I intended to give them box seats. At 10:07, my phone rang. Caller ID, Connie Driscoll, HOA president. I let it go to voicemail, listened after the beep, a syrupy mix of apology and intimidation. So, unfortunate this misunderstanding, but also community standards must be respected. At 10:15 she rang again, and I answered. Connie launched into a sermon about visual harmony and safety hazards posed by aged root systems. But when she tried to schedule a collaborative removal plan, I interrupted. The tree was protected under county, state, and federal statutes. Any trimming required a permit. Removal would trigger fines up to $50,000 and potential jail time. Connie's voice shrank 3 sizes, but she rallied, insisting their hired arborist had flagged advanced internal decay. I asked for the arborist's license number and a copy of the report. She promised to email, hung up. No email arrived. Mara showed up at noon with Thai takeout and a gleam in her eye. We drafted a temporary restraining order request on her laptop, referencing Section 6 of the Historic Preservation Act, along with case law she knew by heart. Judge Whitcomb, whose daughter had once posed for senior photos under the oak, signed the TRO before lunch. A sheriff's deputy taped it over the orange violation notice for good measure. By mid-afternoon, the Riverside Community Forum had RSVP counts climbing for an impromptu Save the Space gathering under the tree that evening. Lemonade, story sharing, maybe acoustic guitar. Celine offered cupcakes shaped like oak leaves. Tom promised a portable projector for a slideshow of archival photos I was pulling together. The chatter felt less like protest and more like a neighborhood potluck with legal subtext. Connie, sensing PR disaster, tried a new tactic. At 3:45, a white pickup bearing magnet signs, County Forestry Division, pulled up. A tall man in a brand-new Carhartt jacket stepped out with a clipboard and a drill auger. I greeted him with a cheerful wave. "Officer Culver, I presume?" He blinked. Yes." I asked him to produce ID. He flashed a laminated card that looked printed on a home laminator. Mara, recording from the porch, read the card aloud. "Martin Culver, Tree Assessment Specialist, Office 3B. She Googled on the spot. Office 3B had been dissolved 4 years earlier. Culver's badge photo was the same selfie used on an industry newsletter. When Mara requested his arborist certification number, he gave one. She typed it into the state database. Belonged to a retired rosebush consultant in Santa Rosa. Culver attempted a visual inspection, declared extensive decay, and recommended immediate removal. Mara asked how he'd diagnosed internal rot in 90 seconds. He mumbled about professional instinct. I pointed to the TRO taped to the trunk. Any destructive testing would violate a court order. Culver and his clipboard retreated. Connie, watching from her pearl Lexus, drove off without making eye contact. At 7 p.m., 60-plus neighbors gathered beneath the oak. I draped a white sheet between two lower limbs for the projector. The film reel digitized onto my laptop flickered scenes from the 1959 Founders' Day picnic. Women in poodle skirts dancing, my grandfather grilling corn, a county commissioner. Unveiling the very plaque the HOA now pretended not to see. Kids chasing each other mirrored black and white images of their grandparents. Mara spoke briefly about roots deeper than bylaws. Celine read a poem. Someone passed a hat for legal funds, but ended up stuffing it with wildflower seeds. We decided to plant them along the riverbank as living punctuation. Connie, perhaps sensing the optics, stayed away. At dawn the next day, a fresh envelope appeared, this time certified mail. Notice of emergency board meeting. Agenda, immediate tree removal vote. They'd scheduled it for that evening. Closed to non-members. Our bylaws allowed any homeowner to attend, so Mara, Tom, May, Celine, and I arrived with half the neighborhood in tow. Connie tried to limit entry. Mara cited open meeting statutes. We filed in. The board's hired arborist turned out to be none other than Officer Culver, now wearing a polo embroidered with Green Solutions landscaping. He presented printed photos of hollow cavities, but the images were obvious stock shots. One featured Spanish moss, which doesn't grow here. When pressed for a drilling report number, he fumbled. Mara introduced an independent certified arborist, Dr. Althea Singh, doctorate in urban forestry, who'd volunteered after seeing the story on the news. She testified the tree was healthy for its age, minor lightning scar stabilized decades ago. She displayed increment borer core samples dated from a 2018 health check, showing solid growth rings. Connie tried to object. Dr. Singh reminded her tampering with a landmark could void Riverside's tax exemptions on green space. Harold, the vice president, proposed tabling the matter. Stan, treasurer, whispered about falling liability. Mara slid a manila folder. Across the table, copies of insurance certificates confirming the HOA's policy already covered landmark flora. Premiums paid by homeowner dues Connie kept raising. The membership moved, seconded and voted overwhelmingly. Rescind the removal order, hire Dr. Singh for annual checkups, and establish a heritage committee to oversee all future landscaping decisions. Connie's smile cracked. She announced her resignation for health reasons the next morning. Rumor said she'd been counting on a landscaping kickback and a free gazebo photo op. The squirrels, at least, remained impartial. For a moment life returned to normal. Kids swung on tire swings, looped around the oak's sturdy limb. Couples picnicked. TikTok teens filmed dances. The uplights we installed cast golden filigree across the lawn at night. I thought the crisis over. Then came the certified letter from Riverside Ventures, LLC, a boutique wellness resort planned for the 5-acre parcel bordering my back fence, the last section of Riverside Meadow not yet gentrified. Their site plan featured 38 cedar micro-cabins, a yoga deck jutting over the water, an herb garden, and buried on page 8, strategic pruning of existing tree line to optimize scenic views. The live oak itself sat technically outside the property, but its root system fed off that meadow's water table. Heavy construction would sever feeder roots, drop water levels, and by slow suffocation kill what chainsaws could not. The letter invited community feedback at a variance hearing the following week. Nice gesture after the permits were already rubber-stamped. Mara researched Riverside Ventures, a Delaware shell owned by Aegis Terra Holdings, same private equity outfit, funding aggressive HOA takeovers nationwide. Connie was on their payroll as consultant, a familiar script: weaponize bylaws to pressure homeowners, drive sales of non-compliant properties, then flip to commercial use. Our oak was collateral damage. We formed the Oak Guard, volunteer task force of neighbors, historians, bird watchers, and one retired journalist named Vince, who smelled Pulitzer. Day one, we combed county archives. A brittle 1891 plat map revealed the meadow designated as Riverside Recreational Commons, with a dotted 25-foot oak preservation corridor, guaranteeing public access from Main Street to the river. The easement survived every deed until 1954, when a sloppy resurvey quietly dropped it. Legally, the corridor still existed. It had simply been forgotten. Tessa, the PI Mara sometimes hired, found title records confirming every transfer contained. The easement language, except the last filing to Aegis Terra? If we proved continuous public use, the corridor couldn't be closed without a judge's order. And if the corridor stayed, the resort site plan wouldn't pass fire access codes. We needed visible, documented public use, and fast. We organized a history walk along the forgotten strip. Flyers went up, social media hashtags spun. On Saturday, dusk, more than 120 residents gathered beneath the oak carrying artifacts. Yellowed photos of sledding on the Meadow Hill, a 1930 newspaper clipping of a 4th of July picnic, even an 1899 diary entry from Celine's great-grandmother referencing the shade path by the grand live oak. We walked the corridor's length with lanterns while a local bluegrass trio played. Drones filmed overhead. Children chalk-painted oak leaves onto cracked pavement. It was half parade, half archaeology dig, wholly undeniable. The planning board. Hearing Monday overflowed. Riverside Ventures attorney presented glossy renderings of serenity pods and promised eco-friendly composting toilets. When he claimed the land had no documented public utility, Mara cued the drone montage of the history walk. The room erupted in applause. Dr. Singh testified about root zone hydrology. Vince, the journalist, quoted the 1891 map. The board voted 4-1 to deny the variance and refer the easement dispute to district court. Victory, but provisional. Aegis Terra would appeal. Weeks turned into legal volleys. Mara filed a quiet title action to confirm the easement. Aegis Terra countersued for abandonment by non-use. Vince's series on corporate land grabs hit the front page, sparking a regional investigation. Donations poured into the Oak Guard's legal fund. Local breweries hosted Pint for the Oak Nights. The high school art club sold linoleum print posters of the tree. Meanwhile, Aegis Terra's stock dipped 10% on rumors of regulatory crackdowns. Discovery produced smoking gun emails. Connie begging Aegis Terra for accelerated beautification. Actions to devalue nearby homes, culver billing, tree removal prep weeks before the HOA notice. Mara forwarded the trove to the State Attorney General and the IRS. Settlement talks began. Terms: Aegis Terra would donate the meadow to a land trust, fund a $250,000 endowment for upkeep of both the live oak and the new public trail named Freedom Walk, and withdraw all litigation. In exchange, the residents agreed not to pursue further damages. The deal was signed under the tree on a brisk November afternoon, press cameras clicking while kids tied green ribbons around the trunk. I thought that was the final chapter, until a city council candidate tried to float a motion redefining historical flora to exclude any specimen with significant aesthetic degradation. Code for ugly. The community, now battle-hardened, packed the council chamber, recited tree histories like scripture, and voted her proposal into the recycling bin. A year later, the live oak stands taller than my two-story house, lit at night by solar spots, ringed by native wildflowers, seeded the evening of our first lemonade meeting. A bronze bench beneath the boughs bears an inscription unanimous among residents: "Roots remember what people forget." Tourists stop for selfies. School children tour with clipboards. Couples exchange vows where Connie once envisioned only sanitized. Gazebo views. The oak is still gnarled, still scarred by lightning and time, and still occasionally drops a limb in heavy storms. Some call it ugly yet, but whenever I hear that word, I picture the orange violation notice taped over brass, and I smile, because ugly was the spark that woke a town to its own memory and taught us the cost of letting clueless paper pushers rewrite the past. Mara sometimes teases me that we should thank Connie for uniting Riverside. I counter that history has a funny way of pruning arrogance. You can hack at the branches of memory, but the root ball is stubborn. It pushes back through concrete and complacency until sunlight finds it again. Every dusk I sit on the bronze bench with a mug of mint tea. The oak creaks, and I listen, convinced it speaks, not in words but in slow, patient timber code, telling the story of people who almost forgot where they stood until the tree reminded them by nearly being taken away. I sip, breathe petrichor from deep bark arteries, and think some landmarks are stone, some are wood, but the ones that matter most are the ones that still grow.